Hi, Mr. D. Let's talk a little bit about pond care, pond maintenance.
You know, the University of Tennessee has a real good publication that if you've got a pond, I encourage you to you can go online and get it like I did and print it off, but it's 50 pages, so you better have plenty of ink and plenty of paper.
Right.
But it is chock. Do y'all have any of these at the office?
We have a few, yeah.
You have a few at the office? That'd be what I'd suggest you do. Go by the office and pick one up. But it's just chock full of information about ponds. And ponds require different levels of maintenance depending on what you use your pond for. If it's just for aesthetic purposes and you don't do a whole lot of fishing out of it, then pretty much all you really need to do is keep the bank clean and keep in mind that whenever you put anything in that pond, like if you blow grass into the pond, when it breaks down, it utilizes oxygen that the plankton that can interfere with the food that the fish need. So blow your grass away from the pond when you're or use a mulching system so that you don't blow anything into the pond if you can help it. If you have weeds and need to control the weeds, there are several herbicides depending upon the type of weeds that you have. This is not really the best time of the year to control weeds in a pond. And during the late hot summer, really the springtime is the better time to use herbicides. If you need to and you feel like you have to, don't go out there and treat your whole bank area or around the pond at one time. I wouldn't treat, if they're floating weeds, I probably wouldn't treat over a third of that pond at a time.
Can you give us an example of a floating weed?
Duckweed.
Okay. Duckweed.
And is an example of a floating weed. And I can. There are submerged weeds and then emergent weeds. There's some that grow on the edge of the pond that you can use glyphosate and different different herbicides. I've got several here that I can. On weed control, and that is probably, you guys, is that the number one call you get?
Yeah, but I know Booker does a lot of that.
On weeds control and algae in the pond in that area, yeah.
Right, well, some examples of the floating weeds, I mentioned duckweed, water meal, water hyacinth is another floating weed. There's several algae out there, planktonic, filamentous, cara. The submerged weeds would be like water milfoil, naiad, teladea, pond weeds, hydrilla, and then the emergent weeds are the ones that are kind of on the edge in shallow water. American lotus, cattail, smartweeds, water primrose, water lily, and willows. And if you have a lot of shallow areas, you're going to have a lot of these emergent weeds. And if you have a pretty steep bank and it goes down to 4 feet, 3 or 4 feet, you're not going to have a lot of these emergent weeds. So you might need to keep that in mind if you're constructing a pond, or if your water gets low and you can do some cleaning out around the pond. But some of the, you use different herbicides for different kinds of weeds. On the floating weeds that we talked about, you can use 2,4-D, diquat, or a couple of the more common herbicides that you would use according to label directions.
Sure.
Most of the agricultural chemicals that are out there are not good for ponds, and you don't want even that runoff from an agricultural field to get into a pond. But these herbicides that I'm mentioning have been cleared by EPA, and they are safe for the aquatic organisms, the fish, and things like that. The submerged weeds, again, some of them, the 2,4-D will work on water milfoil. Diquat is pretty much labeled for all of those submerged weeds, and Indothal is another common herbicide for submerged weeds. And then I see fluoridone, and I'm just looking.
Right.
I'm on page 19, I think, of this publication.
It's a nice chart.
It has all of these weeds and herbicides listed.
Right. And while you're looking at that, Mr. D, how do you spray for like submerged weeds and some of these other weeds that you're mentioning, though?
Uh,
Just right over the top.
Just put it out in there. but you need to follow the label,
right.
and you need to understand how if you're treating a floating weed out there, so you're basically putting a certain amount of herbicide in that pond. You need to know how much water you got in that, how many acre feet of water, and then the back section of this publication, it tells you how to figure that.
Okay.
Let me see if I can find that right there. Look
at
that.
Oh, it sure does. How about that?
You know, it has some examples, and it tells you how to do, you know, the algebra that you use to figure, and there's probably you know, a little geometry in there too, you know,
shapes.
But it tells you how to figure how much to put out there, and you can just spray it, you know, with hose and sprays or anything like that to get it out in the water. The emergent weeds around, you just go around the edge of the pond and spray with your regular, you know, backpack sprayer or sprayer.
Right.
But again, this is not the ideal time of the year to do that. Sure. And keep in mind, if you have a lot of dead material that goes into that pond, as it decomposes, it's going to, you know, take up oxygen. So you might want to try to kind of rake some of that out and you know, put it in your compost pile or something like that.
Yeah, they want to freak what we asked for and how deep the pond. We do out there and look at them, how deep the pond, how many acres do you have, an acre pond or what, 2 acres there. And they'll tell you how when you start using the chemical, how to measure it out.
Right, right. You just need to know that. If you are a serious fisherman, or you're producing catfish in your pond, and then you need to actually do a soil test to collect mud samples from the bottom of the pond, let it dry out, and because you need the pH to be you know between what 5.2 and 6 or something like that. So you might have to lime your pond. You may have to fertilize it because you're fertilizing the algae that the fish feed on. But you only do that if you're very seriously about producing a certain number of pounds of fish from that. If you're just, you know, catching a bass every once in a while, you probably need to do a population survey every once in a while to determine what you've got, and you can do that by seining. You know, y'all got one of the best fish specialists in the country, Ron Blair.
Yeah, Ron Blair
is the UT Extension weed fish specialist. I know he has a lot of other irons in the fire, but he's a good man to go out and put in a pond, let him go around and do some seining to do a fish survey. But you know, you can do that to try to determine whether or not you need to restock, or but you know, if that was the pond was just for aesthetic purposes primarily, and want the grandkids to fish every once in a while, I would keep it mowed, mow around the edge. I'd make sure I have some mosquito fish, or the BTI.
Good point. Yeah.
The BTI in that pond, because they do produce mosquitoes, and snakes there are a lot of water snakes.
Yeah, I was going to get to
so
that.
That's another reason to mow around the edge. You know, if you let it grow up around the edge, and you have you a little bit narrow path going down to the edge, you may have some visitors. You know, and there may be other people that like that.
I hate snakes. I don't hate them.
But it's a amazing ecosystem. It's its own little ecosystem, and you got water birds and interesting things, that turtles and frogs and things like that are all part of it, and it's pretty neat. But it does require a bit of maintenance. You need one of these books.
Yeah, come by the office and get you one of those books. Myself and Book would be more than happy to help you out. Thank you, Mr. D. Good information.
All right.
Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please click the subscribe button below.